Well, one thing I forgot to do, Jason, was have you introduce the show in your irritating sports announcer voice. Because
Oh, I thought maybe I got out of it.
no.
Do I get more than one take? Like, can I try it in a few different?
Yeah, definitely. That'll be good.
All right. Well, let's see how I do on the first one here, and we'll decide if I need another take or whatever. All right. Ladies and gentlethems, welcome to the Wedge Live Election Year Halftime Show Conventional Wisdom Spectacular with your host, the Podfather himself, John Edwards, and joining him from Loring Park, the Duchess of Loring, Taylor Dolan.
And then you say, I'm your announcer.
Oh. I've never heard an announcer announce themselves, but
they
I guess
should.
I can try that.
Really? Is that not a thing? Announcers don't announce themselves?
No, they're just sort of like a nebulous voice that you hear.
That was pretty good. Do you think you need a second take?
No, I think I got it about as well as I will get it.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
I feel bad. I'm the only one without any visible Wedge Live logos in the background here.
Yeah, get on that.
Clearly, I'll have to.
You could get yourself a Wedge Live hat. Oh, well, it looks like something came down with that. I don't know what that was, but get yourself a Wedge Live hat. Look at that.
Are you still selling those on the website?
I believe, as long as the Etsy listing has not expired, it should still be available. And if it has expired, just let me know and I'll replace it. As we wait for Taylor to figure out her audio,
this we can give me any options.
We just go through the theme of the show, which is Taylor plugging and unplugging her dongle thing.
It just doesn't give me any options or input. It's just like microphone disable. Okay, let's see how many options.
I think you're good. Good.
I'll just
and I'm gonna pick up whatever fell on the floor.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the theme of the show was inspired by a couple of WCCO stories. Maybe it was just one, I can't remember, but talking about wrapping up the DFL endorsement and convention week, talking about how Jacob Fry actually did really well this week by not winning the endorsement because the DFL is just so far left. It was a good week for him and a bad week for everyone else. And as we know, Sheila Najad won, was it 53% of the total delegates?
Yes.
On the final round. Not enough for the endorsement, but better for her that she had that many than Fry had that many, right? On the whole, a good week for her and a bad week for him. In addition to the other news that came out about our mayor, that he abused his COVID-19 emergency powers to appropriate money for a non-COVID purpose, which was to pay a community group called Agape to basically take the fall for his decision to clear out George Floyd Square.
Yeah.
So if I set up the premise of the show, and we're going to talk about city council, maybe BET too. I feel like you have a grasp on it.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. And you've also got to pick your conventional wisdom character. Did I talk about conventional wisdom? I didn't.
No.
But WCCO brings on Larry Jacobs, sometimes David Schultz, who's a professor at Hamlin, to like be the white guy who sets the conventional wisdom, tells you what you need to think. And it's always this bland stuff. It's not very creative. Like anyone who half pays attention to the news could just repeat what these guys tell people. But that's our role today, is to be the purveyors of conventional wisdom. So I am Larry Jacobs for this episode. I'm playing the character of Larry Jacobs. Jason, I think you could be David Schultz. What do you think about that? And
I've never been so insulted in all my life.
Taylor, you're Esme Murphy from WCCO.
But sure.
I have a thing against her, but okay.
Oh, you do?
Sure.
Well,
yeah,
that's your role. You don't have to do. You don't have to do voices. You don't have to adopt a particular ideology, but just keep in mind that's your role.
Okay.
For this episode.
Okay, I can do that.
And so I kind of kicked off the mayoral part of the episode. Jason, what is the conventional wisdom coming out of the DFL convention, city convention, about the mayor's race? Was it really a good week for Jacob Fry?
Well, I feel like the conventional wisdom would be that it's just a great week for democracy, and that there were twice as many people that voted in this year's city convention than the one in 2017. People were able to do it at their own pace. Everybody that tried to navigate the process probably had a much easier time than they would have standing around the convention center for 12 to 15 hours to get the same result. That's what I think the conventional wisdom is. That's what I think the DFL and friend of the pod, Devin Hogan, would want you to take away from this. But I think that as much as Jacob Fry and Joe Radinovich will try to sell this as a win, they had by far the most resources, the most name recognition, and the most, connections to the establishment that typically favors people in a city convention. And they didn't come in first place on the final tally. They didn't, they were able to block an endorsement, but there hasn't been an endorsement since R.T. Ryback in 2009. So it's not like that was something that anybody really expected would happen anyway. But I think that Jacob has to reckon with the fact that more people in the city participating in this process did not want to see him get endorsed than wanted to see him endorsed. And, he'll sell it as, I've been too busy being the mayor to campaign. But I think we all know that's, he's been using his office of mayor to do his campaigning, especially with the many groups who are moving to the right and are taking up pro-police positions.
Yeah, every moment of his life is a campaign. And so, he and his campaign manager have spent quite a while trying to discredit the DFL process, talking about how it was unfairly rigged against him and corrupt. And as you mentioned, Jason, a lot more people participated this time around than in a typical year. Much easier, just based on my experience. It's like you check your email, click the link, put in the code. That's so much easier than an 8-hour convention. I was pleased with it. Yeah. Taylor, what do you think?
I was really pleased with it. I've never actually done any of the caucusing or convention stuff in the past previously, just because of the reason I didn't want to have to stand around in a gym for 8 hours and talk to strangers and do all of that. So this year it was just much more appealing to be able to do it online and have, you had 3 or 4 days to actually do it. You could change your vote, if you changed your mind, 2 days later while it was still in the process. I don't know. I thought it was just an improvement this year.
I think we refer to that as vote as many times as you like. That's how I prefer to think of it. So we can scare the outstate conservatives.
Yeah.
It's not about changing your vote. It's about voting as many times as you like.
It's true.
That's how we do it in Minneapolis.
You can vote till you get it right.
And Taylor, what do you think about the outcome what does the outcome say about what's likely to happen in November?
Cynically, I'm afraid that, a lot of people are talking about the fact that Jacob won't get ranked or will get ranked by enough people that he just basically wins again. So I know there's people trying to get out the word like don't rank him at all, but I'm not sure how well that will work. So I'm afraid he's going to win.
Anyone who's ranking Sheila or Kate Knuth 1, 2 in either order, like that's what's going to determine it. I think there was like 26 people who did Sheila first and then Fry second. I'd like to meet those people.
Wow.
Jason, what do you think those people are like?
That is an intersection of a Venn diagram that I am just very ill-equipped to try to speak to. I think, it could be maybe some people who have had some experience with Sheila personally, but also have just been like, well, I don't think that Jacob was that bad, and I don't really know anything about Kate.
Did you want to hear my theory?
Absolutely, I would.
I think those 26 or however many people it was, those are just people who like the names Sheila and Jacob, and that's about all they know about politics. They accidentally signed up to caucus. They're like, Sheila's a nice name. And Jacob's a nice name too. I think a lot of people vote that way, especially in local races. Just pick the name you like the most.
Oh, yeah. For judges.
That's Captain Jack Sparrow's entire gimmick.
Yeah. I got an email from the Kate Knuth campaign listing all the ballots where they were listed. And I'm not describing this properly, Jason. Saying that Kate was on more ballots, ranked on more ballots than any of the other top two, either Sheila or Jacob Fry, which I thought was a convincing argument about Kate Knuth's ultimate strength as a candidate, seen as kind of a middle ground candidate. But the danger there with ranked choice is if you don't finish in the top two on that final round, you're not going to benefit from being Fry's second choice or Sheila's second choice if you don't manage to finish ahead of either one of those.
Right.
So that's the danger for her. Though I do think, she makes a good case in that. That email her campaign does about being a strong candidate who was ranked on more ballots than any of the other two.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that will be interesting for Kate's campaign as the rest of the year progresses is how directly Jacob's campaign tries to polarize voters. If he, just sort of runs on this message of, I'm the incumbent, I'm the one who can keep things steady and keep things going, that may not help her very much. But if he continues to push this message of, all the people to the left of me are just going to get rid of police and you're going to be unsafe. If it makes it very polarized between a Sheila camp and a Jacob camp, that may actually cause more people to look at Kate and say, like, I don't want to be identified with either of these, like, people on the fringes. I don't want to, I would be very comfortable voting for this nice white woman who is occupying the middle.
Yeah.
And that may get her a lot more second place votes or third place votes, that could help boost her more than they did in the convention.
Yeah, my big fear is that in an election year dominated by media conversation about crime and the reality of rising crime, not only in Minneapolis and across the country, is that people get scared. And Fry has been pretty good about making the case, and maybe not good, maybe good is the wrong word. He's benefited from the media's willingness, the local media's willingness to to just embrace him as the candidate of more police.
Yeah, and I think, Taylor can probably speak about this as much as or more than me, is the way that the local media has embraced the police narratives of many of the events that have happened over the past few weeks. That also just, is tacitly giving Jacob Fry more of an endorsement from them.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting way to put it, because it really is. I mean, even reporters that like last summer you would see recommended by people like, I don't want to point it out, someone on the Star Tribune, you get told like, oh, that's like, that's one of the better ones from the Star Tribune. You can follow them. And then later on, now they're just repeating what the police tell them. So, and yeah, that does give Jacob a huge advantage, because he doesn't seem to be doing much campaigning in terms of like meeting people on the ground. It seems like Sheila and Kate have both had more events, whereas he just seems to be kind of hiding away and working through the media. I don't know if he can just get away with that because he's the incumbent, but it's kind of arrogant.
Yeah, and I think, Jason, you mentioned this earlier, Fry painting himself as the one who will ensure someone is there to answer 911. He's the only candidate. The other two will eliminate police. The moment they're elected, he's the only one who can keep you safe, which I think is a false narrative. He hasn't done a good job of keeping anyone safe this past year. He hasn't.
Right.
It's his MPD that has disintegrated in the last year. And I say this all the time, and I should probably keep repeating it because I don't think enough people are saying this. He's in control of the police. He's been provided with resources to maintain a police department. It's not really anyone else's fault that MPD doesn't like the criticism, doesn't like the heat, doesn't like the fact that a lot of people in this city despise them for a good reason. Say what you will about how that manifests itself a lot of times, but there are a lot of people in the city who despise MPD, and they earned it. And you can say that's not Fry's doing. That's generations of mayors and chiefs. But for this term, if you're going to hold anybody responsible, it's going to be Jacob Fry. I don't think he's a good leader. I think he needs to be replaced. It's time for a new mayor.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. He is, again and again, when things are at, like, it's fascinating to me that when he, recently made his statements about how, after the results of the convention, how he said, I'm the one who has made the difficult decisions and things like that. And really, he's like, over and over, he's abdicated his role as a leader. He's asked for the governor to bail him out with military force, even when, things were not at any point decided where you could conceivably say there should be a military presence. And that has been his MO. He's not a leader. He shifts, his stances on issues frequently, and he has shown that he is completely comfortable turning the safety of the citizens of Minneapolis, who he is supposed to represent, every single one of us, over to law enforcement and over to people who are only too happy to use lethal force. And that, to your point, is not leadership. It's a sign of somebody who is in over their head and doesn't have any other solutions.
Taylor, do you think Jacob Fry is more likely than not to win re-election?
More likely than not. Oh, no.
No, you think he's basically an underdog at this point? Is that how you characterize it?
I'm going to try to have hope and think that he's, an underdog. If I don't want to root for him, though, but a loser.
Okay, I tend to still think he is more likely than not to win re-election. Though I do, if we're setting conventional wisdom, I will say, not a good week for Jacob Fry. It is good for Sheila Najad and Kate Knuth that Fry didn't win the endorsement and that only 40% of DFL delegates were willing to say this guy should return as mayor next time around. Jason, where are we? What's the conventional wisdom for the mayor's race? Is he more likely than not? Is he a favorite to win re-election?
At this point of the campaign, John, I think the conventional wisdom is that it's a dead heat of Jacob Fry versus the field. I think he certainly, his campaign manager said on Twitter just a couple weeks ago that they were winning. And, the fact that this was the result, that can't be good for them. But I do think that, it took two dedicated challengers to, whittle it down to the point where he ended up with, that 40% and Sheila ended up with 53. So I do think that it's close to a dead heat of Jacob versus the field, but I think that he should be scared.
Another argument his campaign had was, well, we did about as well as we did in 2017. The difference is in 2017, you weren't the incumbent. You were the challenger. Right. You had room to grow. When you're the incumbent, you're dealing with people who basically know who you are. You don't have room for people who are like, well, I'm kind of on the fence. People are less on the fence about an incumbent, especially one who's, Jacob Fry is basically a kind of a national figure at this point. He's been on cable news enough. People know the mayor of Minneapolis now. He is known. He's a known entity. So I don't know that he has room to grow like he did in 2017.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he is, when the Twitter discussions are had of, the worst mayors across the country, people will bring up Ted Wheeler from Portland and Lori Lightfoot from Chicago and Jacob Fry all in the same breath. And I think
Twitter has never been wrong about anything, Jason. That's a good point.
Well, it's true. It's very true. I have a very carefully curated timeline that has never once been wrong. But I do think that goes to your point that he is known nationally and he does have some negatives that will cling to him as people make up their minds for a general election in the fall, especially if the, law enforcement in Minneapolis continues to act the way that they are so far this summer.
Yeah, even if you're a relatively conservative or middle of the road person in Minneapolis, I don't think you can be happy with Fry's performance as mayor from either perspective. He's just all they have at this point because we didn't get a Hoke figure to run for mayor this time.
Right.
Okay, should we move on to city council? Set some conventional wisdom. One thing I forgot to do, Jason, was have you introduce the show in your irritating sports announcer voice. Because
I thought maybe I got out of it.
No, we won't make you do all the words, but I think we should at least have you do the title of the show, which is, it's right there in the URL there for the show link, Election Year Halftime Show Conventional Wisdom Spectacular. So that's a long title and it's giving you a lot of freedom to
all right.
To use that.
Do I get more than one take? Can I try it in a few different?
Yeah, definitely. That'll be good.
All right. Well, let's see how I do on the first one here and we'll decide if I need another take or whatever. All right. Ladies and gentlethems, welcome to the Wedge Live Election Year Halftime Show Conventional Wisdom Spectacular with your host, the Podfather himself, John Edwards, and joining him from Loring Park, the Duchess of Loring, Taylor Dolan.
And then you say, I'm your announcer.
Oh. I've never heard an announcer announce themselves, but
they should.
I can try that.
Really? Is that not a thing? Announcers don't announce themselves?
No, they're just sort of like a nebulous voice that you hear.
That was pretty good. Do you think you need a second take? Because I think you.
No, I think I got it about as well as I will get it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. I'll probably move that to the beginning of the show.
I mean, that would make more sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we'll
unless
do it
we're going to do
again.
some sort of non-chronological show.
I think what I'll do, getting into the mind of an artist, a podcast artist, right now, is I'll move that to the beginning, and then we'll do it again at this moment in the show, so people get to hear that twice.
Oh, okay, perfect.
So now let's move on to City Council. We had 13 ward conventions in addition to the City Convention, and I had also seen WCCO spin this as a mixed bag. And the reason I am skeptical of that is because I was personally quite pleased with the results of the ward conventions. And let's start with Elliot Payne, who was maybe the bright spot for progressives. If you're looking at the ward conventions, he was endorsed with nearly 80% of the delegates in the Ward 1 convention for City Council in Minneapolis over incumbent Kevin Reich, who has been kind of he's on the conservative side of the council, but is also like prone to disappearing for long periods. He's not a person that a lot of people have strong opinions about. I feel like, and I'm thinking that was a weakness here. It's like doesn't have strong supporters, doesn't engender a lot of anger either. But Elliot Payne, obviously, a lot of people are excited about his campaign.
Yeah, I agree. I think, in the wards that I was watching and saying these are potential changes to the makeup of the existing city council, this is somebody who came out with a strong campaign against somebody who is, to quote a popular meme on the internet, more of the same ahead. Kevin Reich was not somebody that I think people looked at and said, yes, this is a person to lead us through this difficult time in the city. So seeing Elliot Payne have incredible success, we know that the folks over at Operation Safety Now were not happy about that. They ranked that as a big loss. But, I will say that it really did my heart good to see, Kevin Reich taking a pounding in the convention.
Are we allowed to say that on a podcast? Kevin Reich taking a pounding? Taylor,
I mean, it's
Taylor?
It's yours. I don't know.
Taylor, what do you think? Should we characterize it as Kevin Reich taking a pounding? Is that a fair way to characterize it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for being the incumbent, he did really bad. And
did he even try? Did he try?
I don't think so, because I'm not in that ward, but if I were in that ward and kind of new to politics, I went to his website and his campaign promises or whatever they was just basically nothing concrete, nothing, just kind of pictures of him at various events, and some were several decades old. It just, I left that just not knowing anything of what he's about. And then, you hear about Operation Safety Now, and it's just I'm not surprised that people who aren't familiar or are new to this process, maybe who are enticed by being an online now, what they would see in him. I don't know anything about him beyond I think the more recent stuff.
He's definitely hurt by not being a firebrand. He's kind of soft spoken, and if you're searching for a law and order hero, Kevin Reich doesn't really fit that role, and so he was kind of left out of this year's Ward 1 convention. And Ward 1 was a 50-50 race in 2017, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's a lot. I mean, it's definitely going to be a lot tighter than 80-20 in November, but it's a good sign for Elliot Payne that he won by so much. So that's a bright spot. Likewise, Ward 4. I'm going to go out of order, but Ward 4, Philippe Cunningham getting endorsed. It was like 60, 62, low 60s. Against Latricia Vitale was his main opponent. And the video came to light, Jason Taylor, of her basically pandering very hard. The kindest way to put it was her pandering very hard to landlords in what she probably thought was a private meeting, and making jokes about how they should pressure their tenants to vote for her or threaten them with a non-renewal of their lease. Not a good candidate.
No, I think, the fact that Keith Ellison picked up that video and was sort of tweeting that out, and getting more attention brought to it, that all didn't help her. And I think especially, just the way that she specifically said, my job is to put lipstick on and go out and sell what you tell me to.
Right.
Like that's a terrible look. So I'm glad to see how that worked out. I think the conservative side of the DFL really tried to throw, I think, multiple opponents at Philippe to try to, break down his advantage. And I just don't think that it worked. I think Philippe has a lot of support and he does a lot for his ward, and so he very well should.
Yeah. Taylor, do you have any thoughts about Ward 4 or incumbent Philippe Cunningham?
I was just very glad to see that someone leaked that video and that people found out about her. Because that's another one that I was worried about, the more conservative candidate prevailing in some fashion. So at least that attention on what she really felt about her job was prevented that. So that's good.
And so let's go to Ward 2. We're going back in order now. Ward 2 was kind of a anticlimactic, maybe, because the two, what you would think would be the favorites going into November, are not DFL candidates. You've got Cam Gordon, who is the incumbent and a member of the Green Party. And you have Robin Wansley, who is DSA a party? I know people say DSA is not a party. So how should I describe Robin?
Well, I think she sought and received the DSA endorsement. Okay, she wasn't looking for the DFL endorsement.
Well, we will call her the DSA candidate. Cam Gordon, the Green Party candidate. So you would think they'd be the favorites. Ward 2 has sent Cam Gordon, I think since 2005, they've reelected Cam Gordon. So they're obviously comfortable with non-DFL candidates. Cam's been a very progressive member of the council, maybe the most progressive by some standards, for a long time. So I don't see Ward 2 sending a conservative in, and that's who I think Yusra Arab had the most delegates at the Ward 2 convention. And I have reason to believe she's the Fry candidate. She's the Carol Becker candidate. So, I mean, if that's your persuasion, your political persuasion, go ahead and vote for her. But that's where the battle lines are drawn, Jason. And I would expect either Cam or Robin to eventually win in Ward 2.
Yeah,
is that the conventional wisdom?
That is the conventional wisdom, John. I think that there is no doubt that, the DFL endorsement in this ward is basically just the JV. It's somebody who will be put on the ballot, but I think the real race is going to be between, surprisingly enough, the Greens and the DSA, which is great for the city of Minneapolis.
Taylor, do you have conventional wisdom to offer on this one?
I agree with Jason that I don't see any of the DFL, the Jacob Fry candidates working in this race. I just see it being between those two final ones, and that's a lot more interesting anyway.
I feel like that's a good way to wrap up Ward 2, is Jason agreeing with me and then me going to Taylor and having Taylor agree with Jason. That's how we cement conventional wisdom.
Yes,
that's how we
that's
cement
what makes it conventional.
Yeah.
I'm the two boards. I'm the two boards put together, and you both are the glue, cementing that conventional wisdom.
Okay. Yeah.
And
If you say so.
I feel like that was a good analogy.
Sure.
Ward 3. Does anyone have immediate thoughts about the conventional wisdom in Ward 3?
I think the conventional wisdom has to be, that it's still, even though there was no endorsement, it's still going to favor the incumbent. I think the Operation Safety Now folks feel good about blocking the endorsement, but I don't feel like, there's going to be enough there to prevent Steve Fletcher from getting reelected in the fall.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about Steve Fletcher, who is the progressive candidate. He's the candidate in support of the Department of Public Safety. He has been good on transportation and relatively good on housing issues from my perspective, supported the 2040 plan. So I like Steve Fletcher. I don't think Ward 3 is about to send Michael Rainville to the city council. That wouldn't be good. Please don't give us Barb's cousin. That wouldn't be good. Taylor, do you have thoughts about Ward 3?
I think it'll be Steve Fletcher ultimately. I like Steve Fletcher. Also, notably, he apologized when people brought to light his past tweets liking Harm Our Superstar, which that was kind of a rare thing. So he gets points for that.
Yeah, it's so difficult associating yourself with you never know. Like, I don't know what Jason's up to in his free time. Like,
it's very well documented on Twitter.
When might I have to distance myself and apologize for Jason Garcia? That's what I'm thinking constantly.
I mean, let me just assure you that apologizing for John Edwards is a nonstop task, and that's what I do with most of my free time.
Yeah, it goes both ways. It goes both ways.
The people at Aldi are constantly asking for apologies.
Nobody knows what's behind this curtain, right?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, it could be the Arby's sign for all we know.
Yeah. Where were we? What were we talking about?
I think we just wrapped up Ward 3.
Yeah, Ward 3. Ward 3, Steve Fletcher doing a good job apologizing for the unsavory characters that he may have retweeted or supported with a tweet.
And live in his ward.
Yeah.
Oh.
Maybe.
We already did Ward 4, which means it's time, Jason, I feel like you might have to take the lead on this. Ward 5. Jeremiah Ellison is the incumbent, and he was denied the endorsement by Victor Martinez, who was credibly accused of voting a Republican ballot in the 2020 Minnesota presidential primary. And notably in 2020, the only candidate on that ballot was Donald Trump. So is it fair to say Victor Martinez is an alleged Trumper?
Yeah, I think it's very fair to say that. I would go so far as to say that in addition to his past support of Donald Trump, that he is the most Trump-like of all the candidates currently running in the city. On the endorsement special, I talked a lot about Victor Martinez's stance on things. He has had some interactions with constituents where, they've asked him to state his particular stance on abortion, and he became very defensive and ended up, stating that he is the only candidate who is against abortion and it supports the right to life from the womb to the tomb, as he put it. So, again, he's just revealed himself to be a very regressive candidate. And he's certainly getting money. I know that, Tom Hoke and Operation Safety Now figures have been working to get his campaign money and things like that. So, he is really, to me, the villain of the city council races at this point. Taylor may have a different view with living in Ward 7, but
no, he is the villain. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, it's concerning. And I think that hopefully this will be a wake-up call, not just for the Jeremiah Ellison campaign to, make sure that they're activating their ground game and working to activate the neighbors there in Ward 5, which is historically a very low turnout ward. So, anything can happen. There's still a lot of time to reverse this. But also, I think it's a good sign to people who are supporting progressive candidates anywhere in the city that, the Trump supporters, the conservatives, they're not as far away as you think they are. These aren't people who just live in Golden Valley or Roseville or Isanti County or on the Iron Range. They're in your neighborhoods, and we all need to be active, and we all need to get the message out, and we all need to support progressive candidates, because if we don't have a progressive in the mayoral seat as well as a progressive majority in the city council, it would be very easy for nothing to get done and nothing to change.
Yeah. Taylor, do you have any response to Jason's long diatribe?
No, this one was just really disappointing to see that Jeremiah Ellison didn't get the endorsement. I grew up in Ward 5, and I actually went to high school with Victor Martinez, which I don't remember him very much, but I was at that high school with him during the Iraq War, and we did like this walkout. And apparently even then he was like, wouldn't do it because he didn't want to like miss school and like upset the teachers, I guess.
Oh, wow. I wasn't expecting a Victor Martinez story here today.
Yeah, that's what I heard from someone else.
Okay.
I don't really remember him at all, but I mean, that just goes to show like he sucks. Just don't vote for him.
It's weird to have, I don't know. Ward 5 is a strange result, I think, when you think about the other results. All the other ones kind of make sense to me. Ward 5 isn't really consistent. And so I wonder if it has something to do with the fact he's a pastor. It's relatively low turnout. So if you've got a big enough church and they all love you, you've got a built-in army of delegates there.
Right.
So I don't know. I've also heard some people expressing disappointment with Jeremiah Ellison in terms of like being responsive and present. I can't vouch for that. I know that was Christelle Porter, who was another candidate. That's her line against him. I don't know if that's connecting, if that's true, if there's validity to that, but it's an odd result because I like Jeremiah Ellison.
Yeah, and I think, looking back, it's a ward that elected Blong Yang before Jeremiah, and certainly Victor is far worse than Blong Yang. Yeah. But Blong was also a very conservative.
Yeah, he went to
DFL member.
He went to a conservative fundraiser in 2012, like a GOP fundraiser in 2012, a year before he ran for city council in 2013 and won.
So yeah, and I think that there, again, it's a small sample size. I think, the conservative voters in that ward are the ones who are definitely going to vote. Older people, the people who live in that ward and have some more money and live in the areas that are maybe directly adjacent to Golden Valley. But the good news is that means that it doesn't take, a whole sea change to shift these results. And if you are in a pretty safe progressive area in the city, I would encourage you to spend some time volunteering with Jeremiah Ellison, do door knocks in Ward 5, help get the progressive message out, because it's an area where your efforts can really make a huge difference.
And you bring up Blongyang, which reminds me, Ward 4 and Ward 5 are relatively similar in that way. You've got traditionally low turnout, got a large population of black people and people of color, and so you can easily, in a low turnout situation, go more conservative, as they have with Barb Johnson in Ward 4. Blongyang was the most recent council member in Ward 5. But there's a divergence there this year with Philippe winning the endorsement and
Right.
Ellison being denied. And Martinez looking strong. So that's what made Ward 5 stand out to me as unusual. Let's move on to Ward 6. This one was a little surprising. I think Jamal Osman's the incumbent, and he didn't get the endorsement, which surprised me. He was ahead, but he was denied the endorsement by Abdi Razak Bihi, who I think ran for the seat when it was open in a special election last year. So good job, Abdi Razak Bihi, coming in at the last minute and denying the endorsement to an incumbent. That's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah.
What do we think the conventional wisdom is going forward to November? I still think Osman's the favorite.
Yeah, I think Osman is the favorite, but I think he should be concerned, given that Bihi really did not mount much of a campaign until very, very recently. And if there were enough people to deny him to deny Osman the endorsement, then, he's probably in for a tougher fight than he thought.
Yeah. Taylor, Ward 6 is adjacent, at least numerically, to Ward 7, which is where you are. How do you think that's relevant in any way to conventional wisdom in Ward 6?
No.
No. Okay. I mean, Ward 6 is very obscure. It's not really on anybody's radar in terms of competitive race. So we're all going to have to learn more about that one potentially going forward. And you know what this means, Taylor? Ward 7. Talking about Ward 7, you still got that Nick Core lit on your wall.
I do. I never took it down.
So do you have any disappointment to express about the result in Ward 7? Lisa Goodman was endorsed. I think she got 62. Is that about
she
what?
She got 61.
Were you a delegate in Ward 7?
I was.
Okay. And I assume you ranked Nick Core number 1 and didn't rank anyone else?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Very disappointed still. I do think it's notable that she apparently, of all the DFL endorsed candidates, got the lowest percentage. Like someone else got 63% and like she got 61% like total. Okay. So
it's a silver lining.
Yeah, and I think there's still a chance. I don't know. I think there's untapped potential in this ward with all the new apartments being built.
Yeah.
But it's just so hard to get against Lisa Goodman, unfortunately.
And there's a factor this year is the various charter amendments. And I've heard people say progressives, the very far left candidates need higher turnout than we have ever seen in a city election. If we get about a good level of turnout, we're probably going to have a progressive city council, but maybe not an extremely left city council. And if we get low turnout, that's good news for conservatives.
Yeah, I mean that's the conventional wisdom for any election anywhere in the United States, John.
Yeah, I'm basically explaining to you what everyone knows about elections. Jason, do you have thoughts about Ward 7?
Obviously I was disappointed with the results. I thought Nick was running a very solid campaign. But we all knew that it was going to be an uphill push for him. Lisa Goodman is very entrenched in city politics. She has a lot of pull with the the wealthiest parts of Ward 7. And I think, that continues to carry her, in all facets of her performance with the city council. So I'm hoping that given more time and going into the fall, that will give Nick a stronger push and an opportunity to continue to get his name out, and maybe work with some of the other progressive candidates like a Mike Norton or a Jeremy Schrader, and try to put some things together and pool some resources and, continue to work and continue to hustle, and also, keep talking about the Yes for Minneapolis charter amendment.
Yeah, the thing about Lisa Goodman is I think she was caught off guard in 2017 about Jana Flisrand ran against Lisa and denied her that endorsement. And I don't think Lisa Goodman thought anyone was ever going to challenge her or get any kind of level of support to deny her that. So Lisa Goodman, I think, worked a little harder. Her campaign worked harder this time around. They were not going to be caught off guard. And a funny thing I heard, maybe I can repeat this. I don't know. It's a podcast. Nobody's going to listen. But Lisa Goodman was trying to get names attached to ballots so she could see who voted which way. And imagine winning the endorsement and immediately your campaign turns to trying to get names attached to ballots so that you can see who lied to you about, because obviously she probably thought she was going to win by a higher margin. She's probably surprised by seeing only getting 60 low 60s. So she wants to know who lied to me, which is a hilarious story.
Yeah, it's just so incredibly petty.
It's Lisa Goodman.
Yeah.
Ward 8. Ward 8, there's basically no race. It's Andrea Jenkins was endorsed with 76.3% of the vote. Is it true that she didn't have any candidates? I'm looking at the DFL's website. I mean, any opponents.
That's correct.
So 24% of the people chose
no endorsement. Imagine
literally no opponent.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Imagine, obviously I'm sure she's very happy that she got endorsed, but I really hope that is like a stinging nettle that will sit with her for a while, that nearly a quarter of the delegates chose no endorsement over her.
Yeah. Jason, you're going to have to explain what a nettle is. What is a stinging nettle? What is that?
As I understand it, it's a very popular flavor of LaCroix in the UK.
Stinging. Is that a citrus? Is that a citrus?
No, it's actually it's a plant similar to like a thistle type plant. And when you brush up against them, they have like an oil that they secrete that actually like can give you burns and cause your skin to sting. But if they're like boiled and prepared, then they're kind of like eating spinach.
That sounds more painful than getting 76% of the delegates at a DFL convention. I'd rather get 76% of delegates than get a stinging nettle.
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody would, but I hope that having to carry the fact that nearly a quarter of the delegates said no endorsement over you when you were running unopposed is, a little bit of a burn.
And so let's go to Ward 9, where Jason Chavez got 69% of the delegates.
You kind of cut out there.
Jason Chavez in Ward 9 got 69% of the delegates.
That's right. Absolutely, he did.
I thought that was a positive result because I think people have an impression of Alondra Cano as very, very far left, which, I mean, maybe her demeanor, maybe her reputation, but she has spent this term on the key votes voting with Jacob Fry. So I think Jason Chavez winning that seat would be flipping it pretty far to the left substantively.
Yes.
So that is a big deal in terms of conventional wisdom, because the way WCCO had framed this as, well, here's the 9 people who stood on a stage and that said defund the police. 3 of them were endorsed, 3 of them weren't. And that is significant somehow. But I think like Alondra Cano was using like very strong abolish the police language more than any other member of the city council.
Absolutely. And as we covered in our podcast episode, when we talked about the Minnesota reformer story with Logan Carroll, Alondra had spoken to USA Today, a very broadly consumed national media source, and described herself as an abolitionist. And then, just a handful of months later, after some interactions with the people behind Operation Safety Now, flipped to do some key votes in favor of funding the police and things like that. So, I think that you're exactly right with Jason Chavez winning convincingly, I would say, in Ward 9, being challenged by Mickey Moore, that would be a significant flip. And also the fact that Jason Chavez this week was also endorsed by the DSA. He's the only candidate who has been endorsed by the DFL and the DSA. So, I think that would constitute a pretty major shift in the priorities and the voting from that seat.
Yeah, and I mean, you replace Alondra with somebody who doesn't talk as big, but actually like can be pinned down on what they believe and acts on it.
Right.
An actual progressive. Ward 10 is another one where the eventual outcome is unclear, but it does appear to me, and it confirms my impression of Ward 10 as a place where I live here in the Wedge. I live in Ward 10. That this is going to be a progressive seat on the city council, regardless. And so we've got 3 main candidates. We've got Aisha Chugtai, who had, I think she was in the low 50s at the end, but on the first ballot, we had Aisha with 30.3, Katie Jones 29.2, Alicia Gibson 25.6. Alicia Gibson is the conservative Operation Safety Now candidate. Also, like her coalition, based on my knowledge of wedge politics and wartime politics, is basically the Meg Tuthill 2009 coalition.
Sure.
And by the final ballot, I think Gibson had gotten up to like 39%, which is basically where a candidate like that will end up in November. So the choice really is between Aisha and Katie Jones. Jason, I know you've endorsed Aisha. I have endorsed Katie Jones. So when we
Taylor
get
is the tiebreaker.
Taylor is not the tiebreaker.
Oh, wow! Look at that flex.
But this is a progressive seat. It's going to stay progressive. It's just a matter of picking between those 2 candidates. Should we spend any more time on Ward 10?
I think that it would be worthwhile to do an entire episode on Ward 10 at some point in the future and actually talk to Aisha and Katie and like their progressive visions of the ward. But I think, you put it pretty well. It's going to stay progressive. It's a matter of who votes for whom. And, you can see that the progressive wing of that race, has about 60% of the vote to about 40 max for the conservative side. One of the big things with Ward 10 is how Ward 10 votes for the mayoral race. There's a lot of voters from Ward 10, and I think that they're the ones who, the Ward 10 voter block can be more progressive than, Ward 13, Ward 8, Ward 12, some of the other areas with higher voter turnout. So
right.
if that goes towards Sheila, that will go a long way.
Yeah, and it's a place with a lot of renters, so with something like a rent control charter amendment on the ballot, it's difficult to say, but that could boost turnout significantly in Ward 10. And Jason, I guess you're saying Ward 10 is a swing, like maybe not a swing ward, but
I think it would be an area where progressive candidates, especially in the citywides, could pick up a lot of votes, as opposed to just a high percentage of votes in low turnout wards.
It's a basket of votes.
Yes.
To exploit.
Correct.
Taylor, do you have additional? I know I forbid you from breaking the tie on.
I was just gonna say, as the tiebreaker, I support Aisha. So tie broken.
Well, I'm going to cut that part out.
Oh, you have the ultimate power here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Once again, Taylor is attacked for presenting new ideas.
New ideas, as always.
So here's the one, this was a serious dark spot for me. Ward 11, because I like Jeremy Schrader. He's been somebody who is more progressive than his ward is, maybe how to characterize it, but he's smart enough to know he hasn't been acting with political outcomes in mind. He's been supporting things that he really believes in terms of this Department of Public Safety, this charter amendment. He's one of the authors behind it. He's got a vision for public safety that is more progressive than Ward 11. And in terms of the DFL convention process, he has an opponent who had 55% of the vote. He had fewer delegates. Let's put it that way. So he's paid a little bit of a price for that. It's not necessarily what happens in November, but he could have easily been reelected as hanging back in the background, not taking an out front position on this, not standing up for something he believes in. And he's got a background in criminal justice reform. I think when he was in Illinois, he worked on some death penalty stuff. And so that might explain why he believes so strongly in reforming the way we structure public safety in Minneapolis. We're going to have him on the show. Is it next week? Yeah, next week we're going to have Jeremy Schrader, at least recording the episode. So I'd like to ask him about some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Taylor, we're going to go to Taylor first, Jason, and see if Taylor has any thoughts about Ward 11, Jeremy Schrader. Can we remember his opponent's name? Because I can't right now. Taylor, can you?
No.
It's Emily is it Hofstede?
Oh, Hofstede. Koski. Yeah. Yeah, and she didn't do too bad, did she?
And she's got Tom Hoke's support. Had a campaign announcement speech on Zoom that stood out to me because it was a story about a citizen app notification. I was very turned off by that. But Jason, should we move on to our mean tweet segment?
Yeah, absolutely.
We've been joined by Melody and Jacob, but it's not the mayor.
It's not.
Do you want me to do an introduction, with the arena announcer voice?
I think one arena announcer voice was good.
Perfect.
But you can introduce the segment because you've chosen the tweets, right, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I provided the candidates for the tweets. Yes,
and I will need to preface your introduction by saying I disapprove of using children or young adults for political purposes. They shouldn't be manipulated in this way, but Jason's going to do it anyway.
Yeah. So I would like to introduce this next segment. It's something that Taylor and I came up with a while ago, wherein we have people read mean tweets about our mayor, Jacob Fry. And since we're reading mean tweets about Jacob Fry, we thought, what could be better than having an actual good Jacob, my son, Jacob Garcia, reading the tweets. And then we were fortunate enough to be joined by another local pundit, Dr. Melody Hoffman, to assist in the reading of the tweets. So we provided them with a list of some mean tweets that were approved by John, the Podfather, to let you select and go ahead and read what you think are the funniest things people are saying about Jacob Fry on Twitter.
Yeah, Jason, because the tweets you initially picked were just egregious,
Great.
Foul language. They were awful. They were too mean. So I've toned it down.
Blink twice if Jacob Fry is behind that curtain.
Okay. There we go. How's that? That's good.
Jacob Fry in the mayor's office has a very similar vibe to Homer lighting a bowl of cereal on fire.
Now it's my turn. How many times do you think Mayor Fry has called Tim Wall's dad by accident?
Jacob Fry accusing anyone of engaging in political theater is a pretty bold move coming from someone with such overwhelming theater kid energy.
Can someone invite Mayor Fry to run a marathon that leads into Wisconsin and keep him there?
Just don't. I'm from Wisconsin, please don't.
I am too. Yeah,
We'll figure it out.
we'll go. Yeah, no. Do that one.
Okay. Isn't it terrifying that Jacob Fry treats his job like he's prom king of Minneapolis?
That's all we got for tonight, y'all.
I think that segment worked out very well.
Thank you very much for bringing your energy to this segment, and hopefully we can bring this back a few times before the election.
Any opportunity to roast Jacob Fry.
And is this maybe a first for podcasts, having a son and a parent?
Emotionally manipulate their child disparaging political figures? Yes.
No, I mean there are many podcasts that feature parents and children. But
did Jason pressure you to do this? Were you pressured?
Legally, I would like to disclaim that yes, I was under extreme familial pressure to appear on this podcast and say mean and disparaging things about Jacob Fry.
And that's all my client has to say for this evening.
Okay. So how do we think that worked? Did that segment work? Is it going to be a hit?
Absolutely.
The previous most popular segment on the Wedge Live podcast was Taylor telling stories about Norm Coleman, her crush on Norm Coleman.
Oh, wow.
I don't think it's going to displace Norm Coleman and Taylor's love affair.
It's true.
Yeah, I mean, what could?
Did anything ever come of that? Did Norm Coleman get in touch?
No, I was tweeting the video at like all of his family members I could find on Twitter, like
That's
his
normal.
wife.
That's normal behavior.
Okay, I only did it once, and it was like 3 different family members. I was just like, "Hey," I don't even remember what I wrote, but like no one replied, no one did anything.
I'm sad. I would have expected Wedge Live is high profile enough that you get a mention on the Wedge Live podcast. You would take note and respond and enjoy the ribbing.
Apparently, I have to find it like a snail mail address and
send him a VHS tape.
Yeah.
Also, very normal behavior.
Yeah.
So I think we left off on Ward 11. Are we totally finished with Emily Hofstede-Koski?
Yeah, I mean, I can say I spoke with Jeremy Schrader at the Jason Chavez endorsement celebration. He was good enough to come and help Jason celebrate. And when I say Jason, I don't mean me, Jason. I mean other Jason. Um, but I did get a chance to talk to him, and he was very candid, and he said, he knew that it was going to be a challenge, and he felt like a lot of progressives in his ward kind of felt like, oh, you're the incumbent, you're going to do fine, you're not in any position of danger or anything like that. And hopefully this kind of, again, similar to the situation in Ward 5, will help wake some people up and realize, that what we see in our Twitter bubble or other people's Twitter bubble, because mine is infallible, what people see in their Twitter bubble is not always the way that things are. And there are conservative groups that are very active and are mobilizing voters. So it's something that we need to really work on turning out to support progressive candidates this November.
Yeah, I'd like to say the conventional wisdom for me in Ward 11 is like Jeremy Schrader is a really good council member. Ward 11, hang on to this guy. Yeah. I know like Ward 11 is the place where during the budget hearings people will call in and talk about how scared they are to walk their dog. I don't take that as a reflection of everyone in Ward 11.
No.
Like Ward 11, you're safe.
Yeah.
You're safe to walk your dog. Go outside. It's not as bad as you think. We have problems and we need to fix those problems, but it is safe to walk your dog and reelect Jeremy Schrader. That's what I have to say. That's my message to Ward 11.
Yes.
And I think we can move on to Ward 12. Jason, I'm not at all familiar with Ward 12 other than a guy by the name of Andrew Johnson is the incumbent, and I think he was endorsed.
Yeah. In an
80%.
In an earlier podcast, you may or may not have equated him to a certain senator from West Virginia.
Right, yeah, Joe Manchin. In hindsight, feels harsh because Joe Manchin has gone on to even worse things than were in the news back when I made that reference.
Yeah,
so I apologize to Andrew Johnson for that.
Yeah, just make sure you're apologizing to the correct Andrew Johnson, not the former president who was impeached.
Right.
Taylor, I understand you've been doing some fact finding into council member Andrew Johnson.
Yeah, this is something I didn't know about him because I had previously been unable to. In my head, I didn't know he and Cam Gordon were like two different people.
Oh, that's cruel. That's cruel. I don't know who that's meaner to, Cam Gordon or Andrew
well, like
Johnson.
It's more like I would hear the name Cam Johnson. I would hear the name Cam Gordon and see Andrew Johnson's face. So
they're
it's
very
like,
white,
okay, they're
very white names. Although there is a football player named Cam Gordon who I think is a black man.
But Andrew Johnson, and this is probably Andrew, not something like, I don't know if he wants people to be bringing this up, but apparently when he ran for city council, people found this old like websites he'd made when he was like a teenager where he talked about like blowing stuff up and like doing drugs and all this stuff, and he still won.
Yeah, he overcame his teenage internet past.
I think they would call that a troubled past in journalism.
I mean, is it troubled? Did he actually do anything, or he just wrote about stuff?
No, he did the drugs, and he wrote about like cutting himself and buying. But
was it just writing about the stuff or like doing stuff?
There were pictures from what I understand on one website. I just think that makes him a lot more interesting.
Yeah, I think he has a reputation as kind of a very boring and very conventional white guy, but actually he's got a troubled internet past.
That's very relatable.
He's overcome.
Yeah. Taylor, do you think that as a representative of the millennial generation, do you think that will make him a more sympathetic figure if he were to discuss this in public?
Yeah. I mean, I think, and it would also just, go to show, like, you can overcome your stupid internet stuff as a teenager. But it seems like he's more gone like the opposite route and just tried to be like the most conventional, like straight-laced person.
Maybe we should have Andrew Johnson on the show and Taylor can co-host and we can like delve into his although maybe he doesn't want to talk about it.
Well, he should.
Yeah.
He's a millennial. He needs to relate to millennials, not.
Don't be ashamed, Andrew Johnson. He did some stuff on the internet back in the 90s. He was probably an early adopter too, because he's like a tech guy. So he was probably on the internet doing weird stuff back before the internet was even the internet.
I would like to raise the point that we don't know for sure that he's a millennial.
It's
just speculated.
Yeah, Wikipedia treats him like a 6th century pope or a Genghis Khan. Can't pinpoint his birth year.
Yeah. For all we know, he could be, 3 Gen Zers in a trench coat. Which would explain his height.
It would.
So have we produced all the conventional wisdom we can about Ward 12?
I think we have, along with some unconventional wisdom.
The best kind.
Yeah, Ward 12 may have been our strongest ward here tonight. So Ward 13. I mean, Ward 13 came out kind of how you'd expect. I think if we're going to stick to the conventional wisdom, I would have expected Paul Masano to crush Mike Norton by even more than she crushed him already. So I was surprised that she only got 67% of the vote. The delegates. So congratulations, Mike Norton. You came in towards the end of it, and and she only got 67% of the vote. You still got crushed, but respectable performance for a newcomer to politics.
Right, and especially a campaign that was self-funded, pretty much right up until the convention. Although now he is taking donations and has vowed to continue running through the general. So, there's still an opportunity for people out there to mobilize in Ward 13 and try to help out a progressive candidate as opposed to one who supports tear gassing people.
Yeah, I think if I would make an analogy, I might make an analogy Ward 13 to like a deep red southern state where you assume everyone there is a terrible person, but in Ward 13, not everyone is terrible. And in Alabama, not everyone is terrible. There's like 35% of the population who's like a good, upstanding, progressive citizen who actually votes the right way. Yeah. There's good people all over is what I'm saying. Don't judge Ward. Just because somebody's from Ward 13, don't judge them.
Yeah, I mean, what if we judge Paul Masano, who is from Ward 13?
We can judge her.
Okay.
Another important thing about Mike Norton staying in the race is maybe it running a strong campaign in Ward 13 gets more people out to vote for mayor.
Exactly.
Got the chance to vote against Paul Masano. Maybe they also vote against Jacob Fry. Although I would guess people are more motivated to vote for mayor than city council. But still, I appreciate that he's staying in.
Me too.
So, have we come to the end?
Unless you wanted to do BET.
Oh, that's right. I did say BET. Taylor, do you have any thoughts about BET? We've got Steve Brandt, Aaron Zellhofer, and Krista Mosing. Krista won the endorsement, and the other two did not.
Aaron dropped out already, didn't he?
He did, yeah. He lost he came in last, got the least delegates, and he dropped out, and he endorsed the other two. He endorsed Steve Brandt and Krista. Steve Brandt, I must emphasize, did not get the endorsement, which I was pleased to learn.
Yeah, do you want to discuss why you're so dissatisfied with Steve Brandt?
Oh, well, I was being petty, and he put out an email bragging about his Carol Becker endorsement. And as a lot of people may know, Carol Becker tried to steal the name Wedge Live from me by filing bogus paperwork to trademark the name Wedge Live and start a podcast called Wedge Live, which is what we're doing here right now, is recording a podcast called Wedge Live. So none of this would be happening if Carol Becker had her way. But long story short, Carol Becker tried to destroy me and take everything I hold dear. And then Steve Brandt had the gall to show up in 2021 bragging about a Carol Becker endorsement. I wasn't going to let it stand.
No. And nor should you.
No.
Nor should you.
I did what all scorned people do is I created a Venn diagram. And we basically ripped that guy to shreds with a Venn diagram.
Yeah. You included him with some people he would not want to be placed in a circle with.
Carol Becker, yeah.
Yeah.
Carol Becker was the main circle, and then Steve Brandt was the head inside the single Carol Becker circle.
Yeah.
But does anyone have any BET thoughts?
Obviously, very glad that Krista Mosang won the endorsement. I think that Krista is an outstanding candidate, will be great for BET. There are also Samantha Pre-Gonzalez is running. I think she was seeking the DSA endorsement maybe, or if she is just running sort of as an outside candidate. So, there will probably be other candidates, hopefully no other write-in campaigns like we had last time.
Right. I was a write-in candidate in 2017.
Full disclosure.
I got thousands of votes. It's quite an accomplishment not being on the ballot and getting thousands of votes.
I voted for you.
Thank you.
As did I.
Taylor, do you have BET thoughts?
No, I'm glad I won't. They honestly, out of all the candidates of all the races, it's like they have sent me the most emails as a delegate that I was happy to.
Steve Brandt was emailing me every day, it seemed like.
And then Aaron had his husband, the animal rights terrorist, emailing me.
Animal rights terrorist? What was that about?
Oh, yeah. Isn't that Aaron's
I don't know
husband?
that story. I don't know that story. What's the animal rights terrorist?
We talked about that on the podcast. So his husband is a guy who has he was involved with some group that blew up houses or something as part of some animal rights group. And he actually more recently was in the news because he met up with Laura Trump at some animal rights event she held at the White House. And then later on they asked her hey, did you know this guy, did all this stuff? And she had no idea. Because he goes by a different last name.
That's Aaron Zellhofer's husband?
Yeah, let me verify this before I'm pretty sure that he's the one that has that husband.
If you ever need opposition research done, John,
Taylor. I remember Taylor single-handedly knocked Tully. What was that guy's name? Tully Klein.
Oh, Tully Klein. Oh, and his laser shoe inventions.
It wasn't too long after that podcast episode where you uncovered his secret inventions. His internet past. He never recovered from his internet past.
I still haven't found.
Right. He was no Andrew Johnson.
I was going to say I still haven't found Andrew Johnson's, but God,
Taylor changed the course of Ward 1.
Okay, here it is. So his husband's name is Kevin it's Jonas, but with a K and 2 A's. KJONAAS. And if you look him up, you'll find some interesting stuff. And he goes by a different name, too. Kevin Chase, I think, is what he goes by now.
Yes.
I think the best thing we could do is probably let Aaron Zellhofer go off into the... What is it? They call it the long good night. Is that where we should let Aaron Zellhofer go? Let's let Aaron Zellhofer live in peace. he has suffered too much.
It's true.
As a failed candidate for BET, let's let him just go off. And Park Board. Do we have thoughts about Park Board, Taylor? You like any Park Board candidates out there?
I like Eric Moran, but.
In district. What district is that? It's in North Minneapolis.
2.
Yeah.
We had him on the podcast. He got endorsed. Who else got endorsed?
Right.
John O'Cowgill got endorsed in district, wherever I am, that district.
He's stealing your valor on his website.
And should we talk about John O'Cowgill using a picture of the cat tour?
Yeah.
His appearance in front of a large crowd. If you go to John O'Cowgill's website and you see him in front of a large crowd, know that that crowd was not there to see John O'Cowgill. They were there to see the Wedge Live 2019 cat tour, I think.
Yeah, because there's someone like right in front of him holding a sign that says like "Show us your cats."
Yeah,
and like I noticed that first. I was like, okay, this isn't his event.
yeah.
It's
okay, Jono. You can keep the picture. It's fine.
Yeah.
And, who else was endorsed for Park Board?
I believe
Billy
Londell.
Menz. Billy Menz, who I often confuse with the guy and the
Billy Mays.
Yeah.
Did Londell French get endorsed as at large?
I don't think any of the at large candidates for Park Board got endorsed. We have obviously come to this episode very prepared with the numbers and the stats.
Yeah. I was under the impression that we were talking about mayor and city council, and that was it.
Yeah, well, I've expanded our scope here at the end because everybody needs a 90-minute podcast with people who aren't prepared. And I can't give you numbers on anyone else, but I think Tom Olson did pretty well. He got over 50%. I think Risa Hustad did.
She just, I think she was
She got 48.6. She was in the lead in the final round. So learn more about Park Board, because God knows I don't want to learn any more about the Park Board. Go do it yourself.
Yeah.
And
it's time that Grumpy John showed up.
Yeah. And do we have any just hilarious ways to close out the episode? Stories to tell? Taylor, what's been going on in your life in Ward 7?
I heard a story today about a naked woman that got arrested at the Hennepin-Lyndale interchange.
The bottleneck area?
Yeah, like by the Walker.
Wow.
What was the story? Do you know if it's a true story, or is somebody just making up stories?
No, it is a true story. And the story was basically she was like out of it, and there were police there, and they were like holding her, but like they weren't, like people in their cars were like offering her clothes, like here, put her the clothes, and the police didn't care. So that's the hot news today. In
just
Ward
another
7.
day in Loring Park, it sounds like to me.
Yeah. I mean, it was only at like 3 p.m, so.
Yeah. I mean, that's late in the day for spotting a naked person at Loring Park.
And Jason, any news from St. Paul? You're still in St. Paul, right? We have to disclose to our audience that you are not coming to us from Minneapolis, temporarily dislocated from
vacationing in St. Paul.
Yeah, your cabin in the woods.
Yes.
Do you know what ward you're in St. Paul? Who's your council member at this point?
Nelsie Yang.
Okay. So that's pretty far to the east,
Ward
right?
6. Yeah.
That's basically Wisconsin to me. I can't imagine going that far east.
I mean, you know, I'm not very far from a light rail station, so you know, it's not too bad. But yeah, as far as St. Paul news, I'm not really sure. I was out of town this past weekend and just got back into town today. We'll say, obviously, tons of love and solidarity to everyone who has been protesting and at the memorials and marching in Uptown. 2 tragedies happening in one neighborhood in such a short time impacts all of us. And, you know, especially seeing how the business community and the Operation Safety Now community and the landlord community are all coming together to sort of decry people mourning the loss of citizens of Minneapolis is something that should galvanize us for the rest of the year to bring this energy to the elections and make sure that Jacob Fry and his sympathizers are swept out of office.
Yeah. Thank you both for joining me for this conventional wisdom show. I think we've We've really put a lot of conventional wisdom out into the world. I think people are going to take a lot from it. That's the end of the show. I'm John Edwards, your host. My guests have been Taylor from Loring Park and Jason Garcia, who is temporarily in St. Paul. Taylor, should I use your last name? I'm always hesitant whether I should use your last name because you don't want people looking you up.
I mean, my Instagram is my real name. So.
I'm just going to leave you as Taylor. I don't want people bothering you.
You can do whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want any more creepy DMs like the one you got from.
If you want to bother somebody from this episode, please bother Jason Garcia. You can find him very easily.
That's right. Come find me. See what happens.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.